afternoon all, and welcome to this panel on leveraging AI to improve transport for all. My name is Dr. Wolfgang Schuster, and I'm very privileged to be moderating our session this afternoon. I'm Executive Director at the Connected Places Catapult, where I look after our strategy as well as our ecosystem engagement and impact function. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by a very illustrious panel this afternoon, including Professor Sana Khareghani, who has over 20 years' experience in technology and business across the private and public sectors, including in His Majesty's government as the inaugural head of the UK Government Office for AI, leading the team to publish the UK's national AI strategy. Currently, Sana is Professor of Practice in AI at King's College London and AI Policy Lead for Responsible AI UK, which is a £31 million grant focused on seeding and connecting the international ecosystem for responsible AI research and innovation. We then have James Tichler, who leads the Emerging Technologies team in the Department for Transport, which is a small team who helps the department grasp the opportunities and risks stemming from a basket of focal technologies, including artificial intelligence, positioning, navigation and timing, future or next generation telecoms, and also quantum. James and Alex, who's just spoken, have been working to develop the forthcoming transport AI strategy. And last but not least, Professor Gopal Ramchurn, who is a Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the University of Southampton, and he's the Director of the UKRI Trustworthy Autonomous Systems Hub, and also CEO of Responsible AI UK. He's also co-CEO of Empathy Limited, where his team is building AI-powered digital twins for the transport and energy sectors. So welcome all to this panel, and thank you for your time to join this panel this afternoon. Just to get us warmed up, artificial intelligence is potentially one of the most transformational technologies, opportunities this century, with a market value that's estimated to be close to $2 trillion within the next 6 years alone, of which a significant proportion for transport. What do you see as the biggest opportunities of AI in transport, and what do you see as the key challenges? And maybe if I can start with Sana in your capacity as obviously having led the National AI Strategy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, honored to be here today. I think the gentleman who spoke before me laid this out really well in terms of addressing the benefits and also the challenges of artificial intelligence. I think the two that maybe I would pick out, the obvious massive game changer will be autonomous vehicles, obviously, but there is a long way, I think, before we get there. So I actually think some of the benefits from artificial intelligence technologies are going to come much sooner in preventative maintenance, in targeting the kind of areas where maintenance is required. When I was in government, I often, whenever we did a spending review, as a policymaker, you instinctively think your area is the most important. And one of the feedback I always gave the team was, don't forget the potholes, right? Because the same pot of money that has to fuel kind of AI for the future also has to take care of potholes. But in this case, maybe actually AI of the future can help find those potholes in a much quicker fashion. So that's the kind of preventative maintenance would be the one that I think is going to be a massive game changer and allow us to not go into places that we're not needed as quickly as we usually do, or on some other kind of schedule. And in terms of challenges, I think data is the biggest challenge. And every industry is faced with this, but in government we have this added, historical levels of data that we haven't digitized and we haven't moved forward and made AI ready. And read into that what you will. But I think that ability to make sure your data is ready, is readable, is in the right format, is shareable across the different modes of transport. These are all challenges that are at the core of getting to a place where we can really benefit from AI.
Great, thank you. And is there also a challenge there perhaps about the integrity of the data. Obviously, sourcing the data is one side of the coin. How about ensuring that the data you actually source is of the right level of quality?
Absolutely. I mean, so making your data AI ready encapsulates all of those things. So not only does it need to be kind of machine readable in its format, but also it needs to be representative of the sources that you're looking at, and it needs to be accurate. There's a lot of different areas within that, not to mention privacy and security and governance around that as well.
Great, thank you. James, if I can go to you next. You've obviously co-authored or are co-authoring the Transport AI strategy. From your perspective, if you looked at the top 3 use cases and the top 3 challenges, what would you say they are?
So in the use case space, I think Alex did a great job setting out a load of the use cases as we see them. There's definitely that massive efficiency benefit, both at a sort of a system level, looking at the whole transport system or individual sort of modes, but also at project level, thinking about how we plan and deliver projects. There's a lot of benefit that AI can bring there. And if you think about the levers that a department like DFT has at its disposal, the biggest one is spending. We could use that spend, especially in the infrastructure space, more efficiently. We could bring AI into those mega projects and start to look at cutting some of the inefficiencies, both in terms of time and materials and energy that we at the moment we just accept, we just tolerate, because there isn't a way of ameliorating them. And so there's that whole space. And I think in terms of challenges, there are many, and one of them that Alex touched on is the rapidity of the evolution of AI. It's moving so quickly, and government maybe I don't want to sort of do us down, but maybe struggles sometimes to grasp rapidly evolving technology, just because it moves quickly, and some of our sort of systems like regulation, legislation, they move quite slowly. And AI is moving so quickly. So how are we able to articulate what it is, what it's going to do, in order to then bring people along, which is the second challenge, I think, is bringing people along on this journey, explaining to them what it's going to do for them, how it's going to sort of improve transport. But then equally, the flip side of that coin is we've got to be brave and say, when we don't know what's happening, we don't know what the answer is, we don't quite know where it's going, and we need to be able to sort of put our hands up and embrace that and say, we're also looking, and we're going to stay vigilant, but we don't quite know what the answer is yet.
So a lot of complexity there to be addressed. Gopal, if I can go to you. In terms of the opportunities, obviously you've been working as part of one of your organizations as combining AI with other emerging technologies. So you've obviously focused on digital twins, but there are also other technologies like quantum that are upcoming that are obviously promising a multifold computing power compared to current technologies. What are the opportunities and the challenges that will come with that type of combination of technologies?
Yeah, so at Responsibly AI UK, I lead a program that's really concerned about making sure AI benefits everyone. And that means ensuring that even those at the margins of society benefit from this technology. So when we look at opportunities, we need to look at opportunities to make sure the benefits are fairly distributed across society. I see huge opportunities around making transport safer, making transport more accessible, more available to everyone, and making transport greener, making sure that we address the pressing issue of climate change, as transport has a huge carbon footprint. With AI, with a combination of technologies, not just quantum, but 5G technologies. I had trouble getting here, for example. Google Maps took me to the other building, and I've never been to this place. So still not fixed yet. We have lots of AI already deployed. But is it built in the right way to keep everyone safe? Are the roads safe? Are the pavements safe for the mothers who push their kids around? And can we build better technologies in vehicles, in the environment, in the infrastructure to make that safer? Similarly, when we talk about accessibility, can we make personal transport, automated vehicles accessible to the right groups, not just to those who are richest in society? And if we're making things greener, we are electrifying transport and building the generation capacity to supply this transport sector. Are we doing that at the right pace. There's a number that was put out there in the press a couple of days ago, 62 billion to upgrade the electricity grid. That's a huge challenge, which is not a concern of the Department for Transport, but does need coordinated planning and understanding of where the pain points are in the grid and which are the biggest emitters and which communities are most likely to benefit. For example, you electrify transport, but only for the rich parts of a community rather than the poorest, and you don't provide enough charging points for the right communities. So you need to think about all of this, and AI comes in to support that connection between the energy and the transport sector, ensuring that demand on the transport sector from electric vehicles is balanced with supply on the grid. But at the same time, you need to look at the other factors that relate to social good elements of the deployment of AI.
Great, thank you. And by the way, let the questions please come into Slido. The question here from Tim Powell from STFC Hartery Centre. Given that Sana said that the biggest challenge is data, what is the panel's opinion on the best way to encourage contribution and verification to large public data sets for the benefit of all? Maybe Sana, if you can get started on that one.
It's such a good question, and this was, I think, one of the top 5, if not, in the top 5 recommendations of the original review that was done into AI by Dame Wendy Hall and Jerome Pocenti, which was about data trusts and data sharing. Because part of, trying to put the right level of infrastructure in place to allow for the things that Gopal just explained will be to be able to share that data, not just within a department, but across departments. And not just within departments and government, but also with industry. So, you can take this kind of to lots of multiple levels. And data trusts and being able to do that kind of data sharing has always been one of the most important problems to solve. So we did a few projects at the time with the Open Data Institute, the ODI. There are multiple projects still underway now to try and kind of break through this, but it's a big question, and I don't know that we've cracked it just yet.
Can I come in on that one as well? I think I picked up on that point about data and data governance and access to data. Lots of data is held in proprietary databases, so you have operators like Uber and others having their own data sets that they don't share and can't share because that's a secret source. You have data that's being fed into generative AI applications that we don't know the source of, and that could lead to biases in the way things get suggested to the end users of these systems. So we have huge issue around access to data or proprietary data, and some of it sometimes comes down to strong lobbies. Those companies are very pushy when it comes to the standards and regulations we place on accessing or providing that data back to the community. For example, one of the changes that was made in the hydrogen sector, for example, where we established a low carbon hydrogen standard. And low carbon hydrogen standard looks at how we collect data about energy generation and carbon intensity of the hydrogen production sources. And if you have that data in the right format, you can apply AI to optimize these systems, to truthfully report on the carbon intensity of these systems. And you can build better digital twins. But the standard looks at half-hourly data. Now, the claim from industry is that this is too hard to do. We can't monitor things at beyond half-hourly when we are working on real-time systems that collect data at sub-second level. The industry was really reluctant to do this because that meant that many of their assets would get stranded. There's a huge cost maybe to instrumenting the infrastructure, to providing that data in the right format. So there are all these costs, but I think government can play a bigger role in sort of incentivizing this data sharing through standards and regulation.
Great, thank you. And perhaps if I can slightly phrase a question differently for you, James. So we clearly have identified there's a potential challenge around data. But there's also a challenge around the whole validation processes of AI and making sure that AI truly ends up providing the support that it's intended to provide, rather than creating, for example, unintended consequences such as biases and could be ethical bias. So how do you address that kind of question? Because let's assume you get the right data. There's still a challenge at the next step around when that data gets processed, right? How do you provide oversight over that?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good question. You know, we've got a rich heritage of validating engineering mechanisms, systems, whatever in transport. But AI presents a unique challenge, because you can't just open the lid and look at the cogs and see which ones turn other ones. It's more complex than that fundamentally. So I think there's some new approaches that you need. There's maybe a place where you have AI validating AI, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But I think you've got to be really clear and really open about the outcomes you're driving for, the expected outputs of the system and how those will lead to the outcomes that you want. And then you need to follow the guidelines that we have, you know, that Office for AI and others have been establishing around this space, the sort of the good practice. But yeah, ultimately it's complex and difficult. But just to sound a slight sort of note of hope, you know, we deal in our businesses and our organizations with complex non-determinate systems all the time. People, right? We have people in all of our systems, and we work out how to validate people as being good at tasks or you know, jobs or whatever. So we are able to do this. So I don't think it's insoluble. It's just we haven't quite got to it quite yet.
Indeed.
Yeah, just I think the point I'd like to bring here is this idea, going beyond data. The fifth principle from the white paper from the CMS talks about contestability and redress. Now, data issues and biases and other issues around, you know, accidents that have happened in the past. For example, we had a talk from Bryn Balcombe from OXA at the Trustworthy Autonomous Systems showcase last week, a couple of weeks ago. And he talked about the accident report from the crash from one of the automated cars in the US. I think it was Uber. And data had to be collected at high frequency and then was then described in words that, you know, not a normal human would probably understand, right? So an expert, an engineer would be able to understand that. So we need to really think carefully about, you know, this is a huge challenge, you know, giving access to not just the end users, but the lawyers, the engineers, the social scientists and others who sit around that sort of ecosystem of the transport sector, to, you know, tools that enable them to probe that data and to understand what is it that they can use to get a fair judgment when things go wrong in those systems.
Great, thank you. And that brings me nicely to the next question from the audience. There are a lot of different organizations that are working on AI development, including DFT, various universities, the Alan Turing Institute, lots of different universities, in fact. How can industry really know who is best to work with, and are all of these organizations being coordinated?
Maybe I can talk a bit about that. That's what we're trying to do at Responsibly AI UK. That's what we've been set up for. We're an organization that has its own research program. So we have a research team made up of people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, you know, AI experts, social scientists, social psychologists, arts and humanities experts. It's a big team. Plus, we are funding about £15 million of research projects, which will grow the community to about 300 researchers, again, from different backgrounds, so law and regulation, generative AI, natural language processing, AI assurance, and all sorts. So we're really trying our best to bring that community together. And just this week, on Friday, I'm invited to come to this partner network event. We are organizing a big event to explain to the community what we are about and how we can work with the community, and we can link industry and government to the rest of the AI ecosystem. So working with the Turing, the Lovelace Institute, the newly funded AI hubs, about £100 million of AI hubs have been funded. We're organizing an event on the 9th of April to bring them together. 22 AI CDTs, Centers for Doctoral Training, that would train about 500 PhDs in AI and applications of AI. So we're trying to cohere that ecosystem, which has been largely fragmented. The challenge there, I find, is to bring the tech community with us. Because what tends to happen, we do all this great research, but we're not the most vocal about it. We are not always trusted by the tech companies because they hold the secret source, which is the data set that they collect. They have their own large research teams. If you look at the kind of teams that the transport companies, Uber, it becomes an AI company, and also so they're very keen to work with us to get all our trained stuff, but to share back the data sets, the systems, and help them really make this work for the rest of society. That's a huge challenge.
So great. So the answer really is responsible AI UK.
Yeah.
That's one of the key mechanisms. I'm sure there are other mechanisms around.
Yeah.
But let me move on to another question that's related to one of the challenges that we identified earlier, and that's the challenge around public trust. So a week ago, for example, the EU passed the AI Act, which introduced a risk-based approach to the classification scheme for AI applications. Basically, the main criterion being the higher the level of risks, the higher the level of scrutiny. Now, if we think about it through the lens of public trust, will that foster the necessary public trust and confidence in AI technologies in transport, especially obviously in the light of the broader concerns surrounding data privacy and security? Or what else is required to foster and maintain that public trust? And maybe, James, if I can go to you next.
Yes, so as I said earlier, I think the transparency and the openness are really key, and the bravery, that focus on the outcomes and being really clear about what we expect. But I think there's also something about sort of, and I hate this phrase, but we use it all the time, that going for the low-hanging fruit first, some of the easier things that are perhaps conceptually more accessible, easier to understand, and showing that they work, and trying not to run before we walk. I think there's certainly something about doing it at the right pace. There's we heard in the plenary session at the beginning of the day about that sort of innovation mindset and embracing failure and experimenting. I think there's something there as well, and so being clear about failure and being positive about it, because we're not going to get everything right. And I think in government we default to picking winners and sort of being very, very bombastic about our successes, but being very quiet about our failures. And so maybe, given that this is a very much an innovation space, we need to be better at sort of telling the other side of the story and failing and learning and kind of celebrating that a bit, talking about why it's good.
Great. Sana, if I can go to you.
Yeah, if I may add something to the transparency and openness comment, which I absolutely agree with. Rania Leontoridi, who was the Director of AI, is now Director General at Department for Transport. One of the things when we set up the Office for AI, she used to say is, what we're trying to do right now is build a plane and fly it at the same time, right? And so there's a lot of work that needs to go into doing those two things. You're building the plane, you're flying the plane, you're building the runway. It's all happening all at the same time, right? So on top of the kind of transparency and openness about the benefits and the risks, we also have to do the hard work to make it easier for the public to understand what this all means, right? Because often the headline grabbing parts of artificial intelligence technologies aren't actually where the game is, right? So, the robots are coming to take your jobs, which was one of the headlines when I was in government. It isn't actually what's happening today, right? So I think the headlines don't necessarily set the expectation of the public in the right place. And so what we create is kind of fear that can't hang on anything specific. And what we need to do is be much more clear in the kind of skills that we are giving to the public, in the way that we speak about these technologies, in not referring to them by one word. It didn't help that we were called the Office for AI, but the point is that these are many technologies. They manifest differently in sectors. They have different risk levels depending on how you use them and where they're being used. And I think that expecting the public to all have degrees in AI isn't the right way. So we have to do some of that work to make it easier to understand, and we have to take the public along with us on this journey so they understand where the conversation really is, rather than, the things we haven't figured out yet.
And maybe building on that point, maybe we can also learn from history. Obviously, history repeats itself. If you think back to the early 70s, and people were talking about autopilots taking all pilots' job away, and in real life, what it has done is obviously shifted the actual role of the pilot from being more of a pilot to a systems manager, and then obviously being available for emergency type of situations. There's probably similar type of evolution that we will see here over time as well. So that brings me nicely to the next question. Thinking about where we're at with AI, and with respect to transport, are we prepared for AI in transport? Or will it simply happen to us over time? And maybe, James, if I can start with you.
Well, I think we're getting prepared, and Alex, of course, is leading the charge with the strategy. But I think there's the strategy is a good starting point. It lays the foundations. I think there's a big, Sana and others have talked about data, this underpin. I think there's a lot of, transport's this huge space, and there are some parts of it that are very undigitalized, that are still catching up with the kind of what is data, what is digitalization part of the journey. And actually, it's been really helpful having some of these Gen AI tools available to the public out on the internet. You just go and have a play with them, because it helps the penny drop. And suddenly that data argument, like where we're telling people, you need to be collecting your data, it's got to be clean, it's got to be organized, you need to share it rather than just cling on to it. That argument becomes a lot easier when you say, well, these are some of the things that you get out of it, these wonderful things that you can play with on the internet. So I think that's definitely happening, but there's a long way to go, and there will be some bumps in the road. We've not really had any sort of big public bumps yet, but I'm sure they will come, and so we'll have to manage these as we go.
Great, thank you. Gopal, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay. Very quickly. John McCarthy, one of the fathers of AI, said, as soon as AI works, you don't call it AI anymore. There's already lots of AI already happening to us. And many of these vehicles that you see on the roads now have so much stuff built into them, so many AI, sensing technologies and all sorts of controls that you can put on your air conditioning system or obstacle avoidance systems and all sorts that are just incomprehensible to the public. Right, so it's happening to us, and sometimes we're having the wrong people leading the conversation with the public or with the end users. We need to have greater involvement with the public in the design of these technologies, understanding the privacy implications, the control implications. I mean, Alex mentioned human machine teaming brings out a number of socio-technical challenges. There is a new program called PAVE UK that's been started at Warwick Manufacturing Group that is going to help a bit with that. And Responsibly AI UK obviously will hopefully contribute to that debate.
Great, thank you. Sana.
What they said. But yeah, I think sometimes it is just happening to us. I mean, our phones get updates, and all of a sudden, your face opens your phone, and you don't have to remember a password ever again. And those are, if you just think about, the simple fact of passwords. It was less than 5 years ago, definitely less than 10 years ago, that the UK had an entire a commercial thing where it went out to the public and said, don't write your passwords in a book that's named Passwords, right? Don't just put your passwords all in one book. Yeah. Well, nobody does that anymore, right? From a cybersecurity perspective. So if you think about, let's hope the campaign works. Gopal is telling me his wife's still there. But I think that the key is some of it will happen to us. I think it's being aware that these things are happening, being in the driver's seat, so to speak, to make sure that the right kind of principles and governance are in place when it is happening in our companies or in our departments, and then to the people. So yeah, getting them involved and into the room is important.
Great. Final question. 30 seconds each, please. If you had £1 and £1 only, what would you invest it in to maximize the positive impact of AI in transportation?
Who's going first?
It's a symbolic pound.
Symbolic pound.
James.
I think it'd have to be in one of the underpins for like invest now for later. So I'm going to go for skills. I think getting the skills there, getting the understanding there in the sector.
Right, Gopal?
I think we need to be investing more in decarbonising the transport sector, and that means investing in a better coordinated systems of systems. So that means planning for these systems to work together. Digital twins play a big role in that, but making sure data is also available across these systems. The energy sector and the transport sector. We should have a transport sector that fit for the 21st century, which collects data in real time, works with other systems in real time. And I think investing in those, in building that infrastructure, that compute and data infrastructure is really key.
Great. And Sana?
Yeah, I think measuring kind of the actual output of carbon, so that we can actually measure what the footprint of various things is, will be enormously helpful in not just AI, but the future of transport and many other industries we have.
Great. Well, Sana, Gopal, James, thank you very much for these very engaging and insightful discussions today. And I think we're now over to lunch. Obviously, we could all continue this conversation for another few hours. So I do encourage us all to come together over lunch and continue those conversations. It's obviously an area where a lot of collaboration is needed. So I encourage everyone to come together and have those conversations and really drive positive impact through AI going forward. So I think it's now time for lunch. So thanks very much all. Thank you.